Hi grade 4, it's Miss Whitmore here, and we are going to continue on with our fractions. We are at lesson 4 now. My hope is that you've already done the fractions quiz that I've assigned to you. You can do it after this lesson, but it's probably better that you do it before because we don't want to overwhelm your brain with a lot of stress and a lot of information and questions. So if you haven't done it yet, maybe just pause the video here, quickly go do it. It's not a lot of questions, and then come back to this video. Alright, so what did we learn last class? Or maybe that was 5 minutes ago if you're watching these back to back. We learned about whole fractions, and what we learned was that whole fractions here are when we're talking about the whole thing, whatever that thing is. If it's a cake, if it's a pie, if it's a pizza, if it's relatively anything that can be broken up. And then we learned things that are not whole fractions, which are just our regular fractions, are anything where we're starting to talk about parts of a whole. So in all these situations, we're talking about parts of the whole, whether or not I'm talking about the white parts versus the yellow parts. So today, what are we going to be learning? We are going to be comparing fractions with the same denominator, which denominator, if you're still kind of confused by the word, that's the bottom number of the fraction. And then we're also going to be looking at fractions with different denominators. Okay, so let's compare some fractions with the same denominator. Remember, the denominator is this bottom piece here, so that's our 5. All right, and that tells us how many pieces in total we are dealing with. So here we have two fractions that are showing the number of shaded pieces. Which fraction is bigger? Use the picture to help your answer. So pause the video here, or right now in your head, look at those two pictures and look at the two fractions. The one on the left is showing 1 out of 5 shaded pieces, and the one on the right is talking about 2 out of 5 shaded pieces. So if we're comparing the fractions that are representing the shaded pieces, which is talking about more? Which is representing more? I'm going to hope you have your guess in your head, your educated guess, and we'll go on. So the answer is 2 out of 5 is the bigger fraction because it represents 2 parts. And the other fraction only represents 1 part. I'm writing piece in here, but I really want to change my vocabulary to part because we're not always talking about cakes and pizzas. Okay, we're not always talking about pieces of cake. It can be lots of other things. So if you look here, you can even just visually see that. Okay, so 1 out of 5 pieces looks like this, and 2 out of 5 pieces looks like that. 2 out of 5 covers a lot more of this whole thing than 1 out of 5, and also this 2 number is bigger than this 1 number, and we're dealing with the same amount of pieces that are the same size. So using all that knowledge, it should kind of support you in the future when you're trying to compare fractions, remember, with the same denominator. Okay, because eventually you're going to compare them where this bottom number isn't the same. But when these denominators are the same, then we're looking at our numerators, our top numbers, and generally speaking, if the top number is bigger, then the fraction is going to be worth more when our denominator is the same. So your turn. So I want you to look at these. All the denominators are the same, all the bottom numbers. They're all going to have the same amount of pieces. I want you to put in order from biggest to smallest these fractions. You don't need to draw them out, just the fractions themselves. So your biggest fraction, your fraction that's worth the most, I want it to come first, and then slowly go lower and lower until you get your smallest fraction, which is worth the least amount, on your right hand side. So pause the video please here and do that. I've talked to some of you and I know you're not pausing the video because you look very guilty when I ask and you smile. Please just do this because it's very important when the test comes that you know how to do this. This is a very important part. Okay, so I'm going to trust that we paused it. I'm going to move on here. Okay, so the answer is the fractions to be in order from the biggest, which is 6 out of 6 parts, to the smallest, which is 1 out of 6 parts. So you can even just see that. This whole entire piece is shaded. So this whole fraction is actually can just be worth 1 because we're talking about the whole thing. We're talking about the 6 out of 6 pieces. If this was a cake and I cut it into 6 pieces, I would still just call it one cake. I wouldn't call it 6 out of 6 pieces of a cake. So we could actually just adjust this to a 1. But this is our biggest one. And then we gradually go down to 4 out of 6, 3 out of 6, and 1 out of 6. And if you notice, our numerators are in order from biggest to smallest numbers. So it goes 6, 4, 3, 1. So that's also a good way to put fractions in order. But remember, when our denominators are the same, when that bottom number is the same. Okay, so this is where things can get a little bit tricky. So now we're going to compare fractions with different denominators, that different bottom number. So here we have two circles that are the same size. Circle A has 5 pieces and circle B has 10 pieces, okay? 5 here, 10 here. That means our denominator, the bottom number, which tells us how many total pieces we're working with, for this question would be 5 and this one would be 10. Okay, our numerators are 0 right now because we haven't shaded any in. We're not talking about any specifically. I want you to right now look at the size of the pieces. We're dealing, let's say for example's sake, that these are pizzas. If I cut a pizza up into 5 pieces, those are going to be very big pieces. And if I cut a pizza up into 10 pieces, they're going to be a lot smaller. So let's look at the sizes of the pieces. So which fraction is worth more when we compare the two below? So here I've shaded one piece in this pizza cut up into 5 pieces, and here I've shaded one piece in a pizza cut up in 10 pieces. Now in each situation I have highlighted one piece, but the sizes of these pieces are very different. So I want you to look at the size of the pieces and think to yourself, which fraction is worth more? Is it 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 10? These pictures are very important in this case to look at. So the answer is the circle with the 1 out of 5 fraction is bigger, okay? And you can see it when you just look at it. So this piece covers, I would say, 2 pieces of this, right? This piece looks so much smaller because it is smaller. Okay, so you could ask yourself the question, if I ever ask you a question where there's 2 different denominators and I ask you which is the bigger piece, you can draw it out and you can say, okay, if I was at a birthday party and I was sharing a cake, would I rather share this cake equally between 5 people, where I would get a bigger piece because there's only 5 of us, or would I rather share it with 10 people where I have to cut the pieces up smaller so we each get one? If you're like me and you love cake, you're probably going to pick the situation where there's 5 people so you can get yourself a bigger piece of cake. Now, if anything right now seems unclear, whether it's this lesson, the lessons before, if you want just a little bit of extra knowledge, or maybe you need a different way of this being explained to you, please watch the video below. It's a really fun video and it goes over fractions. All right, so this is the end of our lesson here. I hope you guys are doing okay. If you're struggling with anything, please send me an email and I will support you as best I can, whether that's through email or Google Hangout or a phone call. Thanks so much for checking in, guys. Bye.